The vengeful tycoon, bound by debt, forged by fire. The cold, unforgiving eyes of Elias Thorne pierced through Serafina Vance, a gaze so potent it stole the air from her lungs. She stood before him, a reluctant offering, handed over as payment for an impossible debt incurred by her desperate family. Naive, untouched by love or malice, she was now his possession. A contract signed in blood, a life bartered for survival. But what Elias, the country's most powerful and ruthless magnate, couldn't have predicted was that this seemingly fragile, pure woman would defy his every rule, shatter his carefully constructed fortress of ice, and make his heart tremble for the very first time. Are you ready to witness a battle of wills, where love might just be the most dangerous weapon of all? Elias Thorne was the formidable force who had once, years ago, extended a lifeline to Serafina's parents when they faced destitution, on the brink of starvation. Elias had pulled them from the abyss of suffering, lending a substantial sum of money. In return, Serafina would, in the future, become his wife. Serafina's parents, desperate, sealed the agreement without a second thought, and thus her fate was irrevocably bound. The wedding day arrived years later. Serafina felt the weight of each passing minute, as if she carried an anchor chained to her chest. The civil ceremony was swift, devoid of pomp, celebration, or smiles. Just a signed contract, a cold handshake, and a silence that echoed between her and Elias Thorne, the man who was now her husband. Elias's mansion was imposing, almost intimidating. The high walls, luxurious furnishings, and the pervasive silence made Serafina feel even smaller. She followed him to the master bedroom, where a grand, dominant bed commanded the space. He uttered no words, merely gesturing that this would be where they would sleep together. Serafina looked at him, trying to decipher any emotion on his face, but he was impenetrable. His gray eyes seemed forged from ice, and his rigid posture exuded a coldness she couldn't comprehend. He left her alone in the room, simply stating he had work to do, and that she could make herself comfortable. She opened the small suitcase she had brought, containing simple clothes and few belongings. A white silk nightgown lay there, carefully folded. It was a gift from her mother, who had insisted she should dress nicely for her husband. Serafina hesitated for a moment before picking it up. It wasn't her style, but something within her made her want to feel a little more confident, even if only for herself. When Elias returned to the room, she was already dressed in the nightgown. The soft fabric glided over her skin, and she felt exposed, yet determined not to show weakness. He entered the room and stopped abruptly upon seeing her. His eyes swept over her body for an instant, and Serafina felt a blush creep up her face. She crossed her arms, trying to shield herself from his gaze, but she did not retreat. Elias closed the door with a firm motion and stared at her, his expression now harder than before. "What are you trying to do?" he asked, his voice low and cutting. Serafina felt a knot in her throat, but she lifted her chin, trying to maintain composure. I'm just preparing for bed," she replied, trying to sound firm, but her voice trembled slightly. He took a step forward, and Serafina felt the air around her grow heavy. "Do you think this is a normal marriage? That you can dress like that and expect me to fall under your spell?" He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Let me be clear, Serafina. This marriage is not about love. It's a punishment." She felt as if she'd been slapped across the face. "A punishment? For whom? What did I do to deserve this?" He didn't answer directly. Instead, his eyes swept over her body again, but this time with disdain. "You don't need to know. Just understand that there's no room for intimacy or affection here. You're here because I allowed it, and you'd do well not to forget that. Serafina felt a mix of anger and humiliation burning in her chest. She didn't know what she had done to deserve this, but one thing was certain. She wouldn't accept being treated this way. If you think you can humiliate me and treat me as if I'm worthless, you're gravely mistaken, she said, her voice now firmer. I didn't ask for this, but if you want to play this game, I'll play too. Elias stared at her for a moment, and for the first time, Serafina saw something beyond coldness in his eyes. It was fleeting, almost imperceptible, but she swore she saw a spark of surprise. He turned, taking off his jacket and tossing it onto a chair. "Good night, Serafina," he said, his voice now lower, but still laden with contempt. He lay down on the bed, turning his back to her, and Serafina stood there for a moment, trying to process everything that had happened. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart, and then lay down beside him, maintaining a safe distance. The bed was large enough that they didn't need to touch, but the tension between them was palpable. Serafina stared at the ceiling, feeling a mix of anger, confusion, and determination. She didn't know what Elias was planning, but one thing was certain. She wouldn't be a victim. This marriage might not have love, but she was determined not to let him destroy her. And deep down, she knew the battle between them had just begun. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video if you're hooked on Serafina's defiance. Comment below. What would you do in her situation? Serafina stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of that night stretch over her like a heavy, oppressive shroud. Anger pulsed in her veins, hot and constant, but it was an anger she kept under control, like a contained flame that could explode at any moment. The confusion, however, was harder to tame. Why had he chosen her? What had she done to deserve this? Unanswered questions swirled in her mind, creating a whirlwind of thoughts that left her even more agitated. And amidst it all, there was determination. An inner strength she hadn't even known she possessed, but which now rose like a shield, protecting her from Elias's coldness and the uncertainties that surrounded her future. She would not be a victim. She would not allow him to destroy her, no matter how cold or cruel he was. This marriage might not have love, but Serafina was determined not to surrender. She would fight, even if alone, even if his every cutting word was like a knife to her soul. Elias lay beside her, yet seemed miles away. He breathed calmly, as if none of it affected him, as if she were just another piece of furniture in the room. Serafina clenched her fists beneath the sheet, feeling the soft texture of the fabric against her skin. The white nightgown she had worn, with a mix of shyness and determination, now seemed ridiculous, a symbol of a hope that should never have existed. She felt exposed, not just physically, but emotionally. He had seen her, humiliated her, and yet she was there, lying beside him, breathing the same air. But Serafina was not weak. She knew the real battle wasn't physical, but a war of wills. He wanted to break her, but she wouldn't allow it. Every cutting word he'd uttered, every look of contempt, only strengthened her resolve. He might have the power, the money, the influence, but she had something he couldn't take, her inner strength, and she would use it, no matter how difficult. She closed her eyes, trying to focus on her breathing, but her mind wouldn't stop churning. What did he want with this punishment? What was the real reason behind this marriage? Serafina knew she wouldn't sleep until she found some answers, but she also knew Elias wouldn't be the source of them. He was a fortress, impenetrable and silent, and she would have to find another way to uncover the truth. As the night wore on, Serafina felt a new resolution forming within her. She would not be a puppet in Elias's hands. If he wanted to play power games, she would be ready. If he wanted to humiliate her, she would show him she wasn't so easily broken. And if he thought he could control her, he was gravely mistaken. The battle between them had just begun, and Serafina knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be days of silence, nights of solitude, and perhaps even moments when she would doubt herself. But she wouldn't give up. She would fight, not just for herself, but for her dignity, for her freedom, and for a future she couldn't yet see, but which she knew existed somewhere beyond that cold, imposing mansion. And as the first ray of dawn began to filter through the curtains, Serafina promised herself that no matter what happened, she would not let Elias Thorne define her. She was more than a punishment, more than a plaything in his hands. She was Serafina, and no one, not even he, could take that from her. Life in Elias Thorne's mansion was like a gilded cage. Each day was a repetition of the last. Silence, rules, and the constant feeling of being watched. Serafina felt like a prisoner, surrounded by imposing walls, and a husband who treated her with a coldness that cut deeper than any words. Elias didn't touch her, yet his presence was constant. During the day, he ignored her, preoccupied with his endless business and meetings. At night, however, he provoked her with glances laden with resentment, as if she were to blame for something she didn't even understand. Serafina tried to decipher what lay behind his icy mask, but he refused to give answers, leaving her at the mercy of her own imagination. One morning, tired of feeling invisible and trapped, Serafina decided to get some sun by the pool. She chose a bikini that she considered sensual, but not over the top. It was a way to feel alive, to remember that she still had control over something, even if it was just her appearance. She lay on the lounge chair, closed her eyes, and tried to ignore the weight of the life she hadn't chosen. It was then that Elias appeared. He stopped abruptly upon seeing her, his gray eyes darkening with rage. "What do you think you're doing?" he asked, his voice low, but charged with contained fury. Serafina opened her eyes and looked at him, trying to remain calm. "I'm sunbathing. Is there a problem?" He took a step forward, his gaze sweeping over her body with disapproval. "You will not wear that here. Go change into something more modest. I have several male gardeners here." Serafina felt a wave of indignation. "Why? I thought this marriage was a farce, as you yourself made clear last night. So, in practice, we don't have a husband and wife life. Therefore, you shouldn't worry if a gardener sees me like this." Elias's expression hardened, and he closed the distance between them in a few strides. He grabbed her arm firmly, his voice now a threatening whisper. "You will not defy me, Serafina. Go change. Now." She tried to break free, but her strength was useless against his. "Let me go, you controlling tyrant! You don't tell me what to do!" she shouted, her voice echoing through the garden. Elias didn't yield. He pulled her back into the mansion, ignoring her protests and curses. Serafina called him every name she could think of: tyrant, manipulator, monster. But he didn't react, merely led her to the bedroom and threw a robe onto the bed. "Change, and don't make me repeat myself." Serafina snatched the robe in anger, her eyes blazing with fury. "You're insufferable. I don't know what I did to deserve this, but you'll see you can't control me." He stared at her for a moment, his face impenetrable. "You will learn to obey, Serafina, sooner or later." She waited until he left the room before changing her clothes, her hands trembling with rage. When he finally left, she sat on the bed, feeling more trapped than ever. The mansion, which already seemed like a prison, now transformed into a cell without bars, but with invisible barriers she couldn't cross. That night, in a moment of desperation, Serafina decided she couldn't continue like this. She needed to escape, even if only for a few hours. She waited until the house was silent, with Elias locked in his office, and then slipped out the back door. The garden was dark, and the cool night air brought a momentary relief. She ran towards the gate, her heart pounding in her chest. But she didn't get far. Before she could cross the gate, Elias appeared, as if he had foreseen her attempt to flee. He grabbed her arm, his strength implacable. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. Serafina tried to break free, but he pulled her back with ease. "Let me go! I can't take this anymore!" she cried, her tears mixing with her anger. Elias looked at her with a somber expression, his gray eyes reflecting a pain she couldn't comprehend. "You will never escape me, Serafina. This marriage was sealed 10 years ago, and I will make sure you suffer every minute by my side." She stopped fighting, her tears streaming freely. "What did I do to deserve this? Why do you hate me so much?" He didn't answer. Instead, he led her back to the mansion, his hand firm on her arm. Serafina felt like a puppet, controlled by strings she couldn't see. And deep down, she knew the battle between them was far from over. But for now, she was trapped, surrounded by walls that seemed to close in around her. And as Elias led her back to the bedroom, Serafina promised herself that one day she would find a way to escape. No matter how difficult, she would not let him destroy her. The fight was just beginning, and she was determined to win. Don't miss a single beat of Serafina's journey. Subscribe now, and like this video. What do you think her next move will be? Comment below with your theories. That same night, Serafina was informed by one of the maids that she would have to accompany Elias to a business dinner. The idea of spending hours beside him, pretending to be a happy wife, was unbearable. But Serafina saw an opportunity in the situation. If he wanted her to go, she would, but on her terms. She chose a daring, low-cut red dress that she knew would infuriate him. It was a way to torment him, to show him she wasn't a puppet he could control. When she finished getting ready, she looked in the mirror, feeling a mix of satisfaction and nervousness. He wouldn't like it, and that was exactly what she wanted. Elias arrived at the room, knocking before opening the door. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice impatient. Serafina turned to him, her red dress highlighting her curves and the neckline leaving little to the imagination. "I'm ready," she replied, with a smile that was almost a challenge. Elias stopped at the door, his eyes darkening with rage upon seeing her. "What are you wearing?" he asked, his voice now a dangerous whisper. "A dress. You don't like it?" she replied, feigning innocence. He closed the door firmly and took a step forward. "Take that off now and put on something decent." Serafina crossed her arms, facing him squarely. "I like this dress. After all, you don't care about me, do you? So why do you care what I wear?" Elias advanced towards her, his anger now erupting. "You will not defy me, Serafina. Take that dress off now." She didn't back down. "No. If you want me to go to this dinner, I'm going like this." He grabbed her shoulders, his strength almost making her lose her balance. "You don't understand, do you? You don't call the shots here." Serafina tried to break free, but he held her firmly. "Let me go, you tyrant!" she cried, her voice full of rage. In a moment of extreme tension, Elias lost control. He grabbed the dress forcefully and, with an abrupt movement, tore it, ripping it from her body. Serafina froze for a moment, feeling the cold air against her exposed skin. She quickly tried to cover herself, her shame and anger mixing into an overwhelming emotion. Elias stared at her, his eyes sweeping over her body with a mixture of desire and hatred. He took a deep breath, trying to control himself, but his voice still trembled with rage. "Put on other clothes now. Since you didn't want to take the dress off, I took it off for you." He left the room, slamming the door shut, leaving Serafina alone, trembling and humiliated. She looked at the torn dress on the floor, feeling a mix of humiliation and determination. He could take her clothes, but not her dignity. And deep down, she knew the battle between them was far from over. Serafina put on other clothes, her hands still trembling, but her heart filled with a new resolve. She would not allow him to break her. He could try to control her, humiliate her, but she would fight, no matter the cost. And, as she prepared for dinner, one thing was certain. She would not be a victim. She was Serafina, and no one, not even Elias Thorne, could take that from her. The dinner was as unbearable as Serafina had imagined. Elias treated her coldly, ignoring her most of the time, while conversing with his partners and business associates. She feigned interest, smiled when necessary, and even participated in some conversations. But inside, her anger simmered. Every glance he gave her, every dry word he directed at her, only increased her determination not to be broken. When they finally returned to the mansion, Serafina was exhausted, but not from physical fatigue. It was an emotional exhaustion, a feeling of being trapped in a game she didn't understand and didn't want to play. She had barely entered the house when Elias, without even looking at her, said, "You can go straight to your room. Sleep. Don't wait for me. I'll be out all night." Serafina stopped in the middle of the hallway, turning to face him. Her voice came out firm, charged with a mix of sarcasm and defiance. "Regardless, do you really think I'd wait for you to sleep? Just as I make no difference in your life, you make no difference in mine." Elias stopped, his shoulders tensing. He turned slowly, his gray eyes shining with a mixture of anger and something more, something Serafina couldn't decipher. "Are you trying to provoke me?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. She lifted her chin, facing him squarely. "Provoke? I'm just being honest. You treat me as if I'm invisible, as if I don't exist. Why should I care what you do or don't do?" He took a step forward, closing the distance between them. "You don't understand, do you? This marriage isn't about you. It's about me. And you'd do well to remember that." Serafina laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Oh, of course. Everything always revolves around you, doesn't it? The great Elias Thorne, the man who controls almost everything and everyone. But guess what? I'm not one of your puppets. You can imprison me here. You can humiliate me. But you'll never control me." Elias stared at her for a moment, his expression impenetrable. But for a brief instant, Serafina swore she saw something in his eyes, something that looked almost like pain. But then he turned away, his voice cold and distant again. "Go to your room, Serafina. I don't have patience for this." She didn't move. "You don't tell me what to do, Elias. I'll go to my room when I want to, not when you order me." He stopped, but didn't turn around. "You're testing my patience." "And you're testing mine," she replied, her voice now filled with emotion. "I don't know what I did to deserve this, but one thing is certain. I won't let you destroy me. You can hate me, you can treat me like trash, but I'm still a person, and you won't take that from me." Elias finally turned, his eyes now filled with a rage she had never seen before. "You know nothing, Serafina. Nothing. So stop talking as if you do." She felt a chill down her spine, but she didn't back down. "Then explain it to me. Tell me why you hate me so much. Tell me why you insist on making me suffer." He was silent for a moment, his breathing heavy. But then he simply turned and began to walk towards the door. "Good night, Serafina." She watched him leave, feeling a mixture of anger, frustration, and, to her surprise, a pang of sadness. When the door closed behind him, she finally moved, heading towards the room. Her legs trembled, but her determination was stronger than ever. Serafina looked at the torn dress that was still on the floor. She picked it up, feeling the soft fabric between her fingers, and then threw it into the laundry basket. He could tear her clothes, he could try to break her, but she wouldn't let him take her strength. And Dasen, as she lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling, Serafina promised herself that no matter what happened, she would not give up. He could try to control her, could try to humiliate her, but she would fight. Because deep down, she knew the real battle wasn't against Elias. It was for herself, and she was determined to win. Unraveling the past, the haunting truth. Elias Thorne's mansion seemed to guard secrets in every corner, and Serafina was determined to unravel them. Slowly, she began to piece together the puzzle that had been her life since marrying him. The rigid rules, the cold treatment, the constant humiliations, all had a reason, and she knew that to understand the present, she needed to delve into the past. It was on a silent afternoon, while walking through the mansion's corridors, that Serafina overheard a conversation between two servants. They spoke in hushed tones, almost whispering, but the words reached her like thunder. "Do you remember her?" one voice asked. "Lydia?" the other replied. "Of course I remember. She was the only person he truly loved. But after the accident, he was never the same." Serafina stopped, her heart racing. "Lydia!" The name echoed in her mind, bringing with it a wave of questions. Who was Lydia? What had happened to her? And most importantly, what did she have to do with Elias and their marriage? Determined to discover the truth, Serafina began to investigate. She scoured the mansion for clues, discreetly questioned the servants, and finally found an old photo hidden in one of Elias's office drawers. It was a faded image of a young Elias beside a girl with a radiant smile. "Lydia!" The young woman's face was sweet, full of life, and Serafina felt a pang of pain looking at her. It was clear that Elias had loved her deeply. But what had happened to her? And why did he harbor so much resentment towards Serafina? The answer came on a stormy night. Serafina couldn't bear the doubts that consumed her any longer. She went to Elias's office, where he sat, lost in thought. Without hesitation, she confronted him. "Who was Lydia?" she asked, her voice firm, but charged with emotion. Elias looked up, surprised to see her there. His expression quickly hardened. "What are you talking about?" "I know you loved her," Serafina continued, ignoring his coldness. "And I know something happened to her. What was it? What does she have to do with me?" Elias was silent for a moment, his gray eyes shining with a mixture of anger and pain. Then he stood, his voice now a roar. "It was your family who destroyed the only person I ever loved. Do you think you can live happily while Lydia rots in her grave?" Serafina felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Elias's words echoed in her mind, bringing with them a painful truth. "My parents?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "What did they do?" Elias took a deep breath, trying to control himself, but his anger and pain were greater than him. "When I was 17, your parents were responsible for the accident that killed Lydia. They were drunk, driving like maniacs, and hit the car she was in. She died instantly." Serafina felt tears stream down her face. The shock hit her like a storm, leaving her breathless. Everything made sense now. Their marriage wasn't about love or control. It was a sentence of revenge. He hated her because she was the daughter of the people who had taken the life of the woman he loved. "So," she began, her voice broken, "I was never wanted, only hated." Elias stared, his eyes full of a pain he couldn't hide. He expected to see her crumble, expected her to cry and beg for forgiveness. But Serafina did something he didn't expect. She stared back, her tears still falling, but her voice firm. "If you wanted to destroy me, you succeeded. But now tell me, did it bring Lydia back?" The phrase hit Elias like a knife. He froze, his anger and pain mingling into an overwhelming emotion. He wanted to shout, wanted to say yes, that revenge would be worth it. But the words wouldn't come out. Instead, he simply turned away, unable to face Serafina. She stood there, alone in the office, feeling the weight of the truth on her shoulders. Her marriage was a sham, a punishment for something she hadn't even known had happened. But deep down, she knew she couldn't continue like this. She needed to find a way to move forward, even if it meant facing the past and the pain it brought. Stay with us. Subscribe and like this video for more intense moments. What do you think Serafina will do next? Comment your predictions. As the storm raged outside, Serafina stood in the middle of the office, feeling the weight of Elias's words like an anchor, pulling her to the depths of an ocean of pain and despair. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't wipe them away. She let them burn on her skin, as if each drop was a reminder of the suffering he had carried for so long, and was now pouring over her. But in the midst of that pain, something within her began to rise, a strength she hadn't even known she possessed. Serafina took a deep breath, feeling the cold air of the room enter her lungs, and looked at Elias, who now stood with his back to her, his hands firmly resting on the desk, as if he needed that surface to remain upright. "You think you destroyed me?" she asked, her voice low, but firm, cutting through the heavy silence that hung in the air. "You think humiliating me, imprisoning me here, treating me as if I'm nothing, that this will bring Lydia back?" Elias didn't respond. His shoulders were tense, and Serafina could see the anger and pain pulsing in him, like an open wound that had never healed. But she didn't stop. "I understand your pain, Elias. I understand that you lost someone you loved. But what you are doing to me, this isn't justice. This is just more pain. And in the end, the ones suffering aren't my parents. It's me. Me who didn't even know what they did. Me who had no choice in any of this." He finally turned, his gray eyes now filled with a mixture of rage and something deeper, something that looked almost like despair. "You don't understand anything," he said, his voice hoarse. "You don't know what it's like to lose everything." "Maybe I don't," Serafina admitted, her tears still falling, but her voice now stronger. "But I know what it's like to be treated as if I'm worthless, and I know this isn't life, this isn't justice, this is just emptiness." Elias stared at her for a moment, and Serafina saw something in his eyes that she had never seen before. It was as if, for a brief instant, the mask of coldness he always wore had cracked, revealing the pain and loneliness he carried within him. But then he turned away again, as if he couldn't bear to look at her. "Go away," he said, his voice now a whisper. "Go to your room." Serafina didn't move. "No, I won't run anymore. I won't hide anymore. If you want to punish me, then do it. But know that I won't let you destroy me. I am more than this. I am more than your revenge." Elias remained silent, and Serafina felt a new determination blossoming within her. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. She wouldn't allow Elias's hatred to define her. She was more than a victim, more than a punishment. She was Serafina, and no matter what happened, she would fight to find her own peace. She took a step back, still looking at him, and then turned and left the office. The storm outside seemed to reflect the turmoil within her, but deep down, she knew there was a calm waiting for her, if she was strong enough to reach it. As she walked down the corridor towards her room, Serafina felt a new resolve forming within her. She didn't know how or when, but she would find a way to move forward. She wouldn't allow Elias's past to imprison her. She would fight, not just for herself, but for a future where she could find her own happiness, far from the shadow of hatred and revenge. And as the storm continued to rage outside, Serafina promised herself that no matter what happened, she would not give up. She was Serafina, and in the end, that was all that mattered. After the revelation of the past that linked their families, Serafina withdrew completely. She no longer fought, no longer argued, no longer tried to escape. Her indifference was like an impenetrable wall, and Elias, try as he might to ignore it, felt its weight every day. He wanted to see her broken, begging for freedom, but Serafina didn't give him that pleasure. She simply existed, silent and distant, like a constant echo of his own guilt. Elias began to notice things he had previously ignored: the strength in her eyes, the beauty she possessed even without trying, the way she moved with a natural grace. These things began to haunt him, appearing in his dreams and thoughts when he least expected it. But he refused to accept that something within him was changing. He couldn't allow it. Lydia was still there, in his memory, and he couldn't betray her. Until an incident occurred. Serafina was in the kitchen, preparing a cup of tea, and then took the cup to her room to drink the tea there, trying to enjoy her solitude in some way, when she accidentally spilled boiling water on her back. The hot liquid streamed down her skin, leaving a red, painful burn. She stifled a scream, but the sound of her pain echoed through the mansion, and Elias appeared in seconds. "What happened?" he asked, his voice rougher than usual, but with a concern he couldn't hide. Serafina tried to pull away, holding her back with one hand. "Nothing. I just spilled some hot water. It's fine." Elias was not convinced. He approached, his eyes scanning her face for signs of pain. "Let me see." She recoiled, shaking her head. "No need. I'll take care of it myself," he insisted, his voice now firmer. "Serafina, you can't reach your back alone. Let me help." She hesitated, but the pain was intense, and she knew he was right. Even so, the idea of exposing herself to him filled her with shame. "No, I can. I don't want your help." Elias didn't give up. He approached again, his voice softer, but still insistent. "You're hurt. Let me help. It's just an ointment." Serafina crossed her arms, trying to protect herself. "I don't need you. I don't want your help." He took a deep breath, clearly frustrated, but trying to remain calm. "Serafina, this is stupid. You're in pain, and I can help. Why do you insist on being stubborn?" She looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and vulnerability. "Because I don't want you to touch me. I don't want you to see. I don't need this." Elias stood still for a moment, looking at her, feeling a mixture of emotions he couldn't understand. He wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come out. Instead, he simply picked up the ointment and placed it on the bed beside her. "It's here. Do what you want." He started to leave the room, but stopped at the door, looking back. "But know that you are being stubborn for no reason. I just want to help." Serafina stood still, feeling the pain in her back and shame burning on her face. She knew he was right, but the idea of exposing herself to him was too much. Even so, the pain was unbearable, and she knew she couldn't reach her back alone. Finally, with a sigh of resignation, she picked up the ointment and looked at him. "All right, but only because it hurts too much." Elias returned to the room, closing the door behind him. He approached her, his expression serious, but without his usual coldness. "It will sting a little," he warned, his voice softer than usual. Serafina hesitated for a moment, but finally agreed. She slowly removed her blouse, leaving her back bare. The burn was visible, a red mark that contrasted with her soft skin. She felt the cold air of the room on her skin, but what made her most uncomfortable was the sensation of being exposed before him. Elias stood still for a moment, looking at her, feeling something he couldn't name. He began to apply the ointment carefully, his fingers touching her skin with a delicacy he didn't know he possessed. The contact between them was warm, intense, and the air around them seemed charged with a tension neither of them wanted to admit. Serafina took a deep breath, feeling his touch on her skin. It was strange, but somehow comforting. She didn't want to admit it, but there was something about that proximity that made her feel vulnerable in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. Elias, in turn, fought against his own feelings. He didn't want to care. He didn't want to feel anything for her. But as his fingers slid over her skin, he began to realize that the revenge he had so long nourished no longer made sense. Serafina was not to blame for what had happened in the past. She was just a victim, just like him. "Done," he said finally, his voice hoarse. "That should help." Serafina pulled her blouse back on, covering herself quickly. "Thank you," she murmured, without looking at him. Elias stood still for a moment, looking at her, feeling a mixture of emotions he couldn't understand. He wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come out. Instead, he simply left the room, leaving her alone. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. The image of Serafina, her back bare and vulnerable, haunted his thoughts. He knew something had changed within him, but he didn't want to admit it. The revenge he had so long nourished no longer seemed so sweet. And deep down, he knew Lydia would never return, no matter how much he tried to punish Serafina. Meanwhile, Serafina remained in the room, sitting on the edge of the bed, the echo of Elias's touch still seemingly etched on her skin. She brought her hand to her back, where the ointment had been applied, and felt a shiver run through her body. It wasn't just the effect of the medication, but something deeper, something she couldn't name. His touch, though careful, had awakened a sensation she hadn't expected. It was as if, in that moment of vulnerability, an invisible barrier between them had been broken. She looked at the door where he had left and felt a mix of confusion and relief. Elias was not the same man who had treated her with coldness and contempt since the beginning of their marriage. There was something different in the way he had touched her, in the way his fingers had smoothly glided over her skin, as if he were trying to fix something he himself had broken. Serafina didn't want to admit it, but it disturbed her. She didn't want to feel anything for him, not after everything he had done. But deep down, she knew something had changed. Elias, in turn, stood in the corridor, facing the closed bedroom door. He looked at his own hands, as if he could still feel the texture of Serafina's skin beneath his fingers. That touch had awakened something within him, something he had tried for years to bury. He didn't want to care. He didn't want to feel. But as the minutes passed, he realized that the revenge he had so long nourished no longer brought the relief he expected. He closed his eyes, trying to push the image of Serafina from his mind, but she was there, persistent. Her eyes full of defiance, her silent strength, her vulnerability in that moment of pain. He could no longer deny that she wasn't the villain of the story. She was just a victim, just like him. And deep down, he knew Lydia would never return, no matter how much he tried to punish Serafina. Meanwhile, Serafina lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Her mind was filled with conflicting thoughts. She didn't know what to feel. On one hand, there was the hatred she harbored for him, for everything he had done. On the other, there was that small spark of something she couldn't ignore. Perhaps it was compassion. Perhaps it was something more. She didn't know, and that frightened her. She turned on her side, hugging the pillow, trying to push away the thoughts. But they returned, insistent. The way he touched her, the concern in his voice, the softness in his gestures. All of this contradicted the man she knew. And for the first time, she allowed herself to think that perhaps there was more to him than just hatred and revenge. Serafina knew she couldn't simply forget everything that had happened. The emotional scars he had left still hurt, and she wasn't ready to forgive. But perhaps there was a chance for something different, something that wasn't just pain and suffering, something that could bring peace, not just for her, but for both of them. As the night wore on, Serafina promised herself that she wouldn't let the past define her, She was more than a victim, more than a punishment. She was Serafina, and no matter what happened, she would fight to find her own peace. And perhaps, in the process, she could help Elias find his. Outside the room, Elias was still standing, looking at the hands that had touched Serafina, with a delicacy he didn't know he possessed. He knew something had changed within him, but he didn't want to admit it. The revenge he had so long nourished no longer seemed so sweet, and deep down, he knew Lydia would never return, no matter how much he tried to punish Serafina. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of that truth on his shoulders. Perhaps it was time to leave the past behind. Perhaps it was time to find a way to move forward. But for now, he simply stepped away from the door, leaving Serafina alone with her thoughts. And, as the silent night enveloped the mansion, both knew that something had changed. The battle between them was not yet over, but for the first time, there was a small spark of hope. And perhaps that was enough to begin healing the wounds they both carried. A new dawn, forged by love, not vengeance. Serafina awoke with the feeling that something had shifted. The room was silent, but the air seemed charged with a different energy. She sat up in bed, still feeling the echo of Elias's touch on her back, and looked around. He wasn't there, but his presence seemed to hover in the room, as if he had been there, watching her as she slept. When she went down for breakfast, she found Elias sitting at the table, lost in thought. He barely looked up when she entered, but Serafina noticed something different about him. His rigid posture was a little more relaxed, and there was a hesitation in his gestures that she had never seen before. He seemed preoccupied. "Good morning," she said. Sitting at the table, Elias merely nodded, avoiding looking directly at her. "Good morning." Serafina watched as he buttered a piece of toast, his movements precise, but without his usual coldness. She wanted to confront him, to ask what was happening, but something made her hesitate. Instead, she decided to wait, observing him in silence. Throughout the day, Elias continued to act strangely. He observed her from afar, as if he were trying to understand something. When she passed him in the corridor, he seemed to hesitate, as if he wanted to say something, but always closed himself off again, his expression hardening. Serafina didn't know what to think. She was used to his hatred, his coldness, his cutting words. But this new attitude left her confused. What did he want? Why was he acting like this? At night, when she was in the garden, sitting on a bench under the moonlight, Elias appeared. He stopped a few steps away, looking at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. "You should be inside," he said, his voice soft but firm. "It's not safe to be out here alone at night." Serafina looked at him, feeling a mixture of anger and curiosity. "Why do you care? You never cared before." He was silent for a moment, his gray eyes shining under the moonlight. "Things change," he finally said, his voice almost a whisper. Serafina didn't respond. She didn't know what to say. Instead, she just looked at him, trying to understand what was happening. It was then that something unexpected happened. One of Elias's old rivals, a man he had defeated in business, appeared in the garden with a look full of hatred. He was armed, and his target was clear. "Serafina, you'll pay for everything he did," the man said, advancing towards her. Serafina froze, but before she could react, Elias was in front of her, shielding her with his own body. He faced the man, his voice firm and full of authority. "If you want to fight, fight me, but don't touch her." The man hesitated, but then attacked. Elias fought with a ferocity Serafina had never seen before, and in a few minutes, the man was on the ground, defeated. Elias took a deep breath, looking at Serafina with an expression she couldn't decipher. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice soft but full of concern. Serafina merely nodded, still trembling from the fright. She didn't know what to say, but something within her knew that something had changed between them. Elias led her back into the mansion, his hand firm but gentle on her arm. When they reached the bedroom, he looked into her eyes, and Serafina saw something in his expression that she had never seen before. It was as if all the barriers he had erected had fallen, revealing a broken man, but full of emotions he tried to hide. Without a word, he pulled her close, his lips finding hers in an intense kiss, full of passion. Serafina froze for a moment, but then surrendered, feeling a wave of emotions she didn't know existed. The kiss was warm, intense, and full of a need that neither of them could deny. When they finally separated, Elias looked into her eyes, his voice soft, but full of emotion. "You don't have to be afraid," he said. "I'll be gentle with you." Serafina merely nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and desire that left her breathless. Elias's kiss still echoed on her lips, warm and intense, as if it had awakened something within her she hadn't even known existed. She looked at him, her eyes searching his, trying to decipher what lay behind that expression that now seemed so different. The usual coldness had disappeared, replaced by a vulnerability she had never seen before. Elias watched her with an intensity that made her feel exposed, as if he could see directly into her soul. His hands were still on her shoulders, firm but gentle, as if he feared she might flee at any moment. He took a deep breath, as if fighting his own emotions, and then whispered, "You don't have to be afraid, Serafina. I'll be gentle with you." His voice was soft, almost an apology for everything that had happened between them. Serafina felt a lump in her throat, but also a sense of relief she hadn't expected. She knew something had changed between them, something deep and irreversible. That kiss wasn't just a moment of passion. It was a silent confession of everything he had tried to deny for so long. She looked at him, her eyes still full of doubts, but also a small spark of hope. "Why now, Elias?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Why are you doing this?" He hesitated, as if he didn't know the answer. Or perhaps he did know, but was afraid to admit it. "I don't know," he finally said, his voice hoarse. "I just know I can't pretend you mean nothing to me anymore." Serafina felt a shiver run through her body. His words were simple, but charged with a meaning she couldn't ignore. She knew he was fighting his own feelings against the hatred he had nurtured for so long. And somehow, she was fighting too. Fighting against fear, against distrust, against the past that held them captive. "I don't know if I can trust you," she admitted, her voice trembling. "After everything you've done, how can I believe this is real?" Elias closed his eyes for a moment, as if her words hit him like a stab. But then he looked at her again, his eyes filled with a determination she had never seen before. "I don't expect you to trust me overnight. I know I hurt you, and I know I can't fix that with words. But I want to try, Serafina. I want to try to be different." Serafina felt tears burning in her eyes. She didn't want to cry, not in front of him, but the emotions were too strong to contain. "What if you change your mind tomorrow? What if this is just another game for you?" He shook his head, his expression serious. "It's not a game. I swear it's not. I don't know how to explain it, but I can't pretend I don't care about you anymore." Serafina was silent for a moment, feeling the weight of his words. She knew he was being sincere, but she also knew that trusting him would be a huge risk. And yet, something inside her wanted to believe that there was a chance for something more, something that wasn't just pain and suffering. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she finally said, her voice low, "but perhaps I can try." Elias took a deep breath, as if those words were a relief to him. "That's all I ask," he said, his voice soft. "A chance." Serafina looked at him, feeling a mixture of fear and hope. She knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. There were wounds that needed healing, trust that needed rebuilding. But for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps there was a chance for something more. Something that wasn't just pain and suffering. Something that could bring peace, not just for her, but for both of them. And, as they stood there in the silence of the room, with only the moonlight illuminating their faces, Serafina felt that perhaps, just perhaps, they could find a new beginning. A beginning that wasn't based on hatred or revenge, but on something deeper and truer. Something worth fighting for. Don't miss the heartwarming conclusion. Subscribe to our channel and like this video. What did you think of Serafina and Elias's journey? Comment your favorite moment. Time passed since that night in the garden, and the dynamic between Serafina and Elias continued to change, slowly, like the seasons. It wasn't something sudden or dramatic, but rather a delicate process, full of hesitations and small gestures that spoke louder than words. Serafina still felt the weight of the past, but now there was a light at the end of the tunnel, a hope she could no longer ignore. Elias, in turn, was in conflict with himself. He had spent so much time nurturing hatred that now, feeling something different for Serafina, he didn't know how to deal with this new reality. He observed her when she wasn't looking, admiring her strength, her resilience, and the way she could find beauty even in the most difficult moments. He wanted to get closer, but the fear of hurting her again kept him at a distance. One night, as the moon shone high in the sky, they met in the garden. The air was fresh, and the silence of the night seemed to invite them to open up. Serafina was sitting on a bench, looking at the stars, when Elias approached. "Shouldn't you be sleeping?" he asked, his voice subtle, almost shy. Serafina looked at him, a small smile on her lips. "I couldn't sleep. And you?" He sat beside her, his eyes fixed on the sky. "Me neither. The night seems full of thoughts." They were silent for a moment, the sound of the wind in the trees filling the space between them. It was then that Elias finally spoke what was in his heart. "Serafina, I want you to know that I'm trying to be better for you." She looked at him, feeling a lump in her throat. "I know, Elias, and I'm trying too." He took a deep breath, as if struggling to find the right words. "I never thought I could feel anything for you, but now I can't imagine my life without you." Serafina felt tears burning in her eyes. "I don't know what I feel either," she admitted, "but I know what I want to discover." Elias pulled her close, his lips finding hers in a soft kiss, but full of promises. It was a kiss that spoke of forgiveness, of hope, of a future they were willing to build together. And that night, they surrendered to the love that had grown between them, slowly, like a flower blooming after winter. It was a night of passion and tenderness, where the past was left behind and the future was embraced with hope. Days later, Serafina began to feel different. She was tired, nauseous, and something within her told her there was a reason for it. She took a test, and when she saw the result, her heart raced. She was pregnant. With a mixture of fear and happiness, she decided to tell Elias. She found him in his office where he was working. He looked at her, surprised to see her there. "Serafina, is everything all right?" he asked, his voice full of concern. She took a deep breath, feeling her heart pound in her chest. "I have something to tell you." Elias's expression turned serious, and he rose from his chair. "What is it? What happened?" She looked at him, her eyes shining with a mixture of emotions. "I'm pregnant, Elias." He froze for a moment, as if he couldn't process her words. Then, slowly, a smile began to form on his face, and he pulled her into a tight embrace. "Serafina, this is "This is wonderful," he said, his voice full of emotion. "I don't know what to say," she laughed, feeling tears stream down her face. "I don't know what to say either, but I know I'm happy." Elias looked into her eyes, his expression serious, but full of love. "We're going to be a family, Serafina. I promise I'll take care of you and our baby. I'll be the man you deserve." Serafina felt a lump in her throat, but also a sense of peace she hadn't expected. "I believe you, Elias, and I'm happy we're in this together." And so they began a new chapter of their lives, a chapter full of hope, love, and the promise of a future they were willing to build together. And deep down, they knew that no matter what happened, they would be by each other's side, facing everything together. The mansion's garden was full of life. The afternoon sun shone gently, illuminating the flowers that now grew in abundance, as if nature itself celebrated the happiness that had settled in that place. Serafina sat on a bench, watching with a serene smile as Elias chased a curly-haired little boy with sparkling eyes, who laughed with glee, trying to escape his father. "Daddy, catch me!" the boy shouted, his voice full of joy, as he hid behind a tree. Elias pretended not to see him, walking slowly, with a mischievous smile on his face. "Where could Lucas have gone? He's vanished." Lucas laughed louder, trying to hide better, but couldn't contain his excitement. "I'm here, Daddy!" Elias circled the tree and suddenly grabbed the boy, lifting him into the air. "Found you," he said, tickling his son, who squirmed with laughter. Serafina watched the scene, her heart filled with a peace she had never imagined possible. Lucas, at 3 years old, was the embodiment of the joy and love she and Elias had built together. He had his father's eyes, but her smile, and it was impossible not to melt at the sight of him. "He's your copy," Serafina said, when Elias approached, still carrying Lucas in his arms. Elias looked at her, a smile on his lips. "He has your stubbornness, so I guess he's more you than me." Serafina laughed, shaking her head. "Stubborn? He's just a child full of energy, like any other." Lucas, realizing his parents' attention was on him, stretched his little arms towards his mother. "Mommy, hold me." Elias handed Lucas to Serafina, who hugged him tenderly, kissing his forehead softly. "My little boy, you've already tired Daddy out, haven't you?" Lucas laughed, hugging her neck. "Daddy is strong." Elias sat beside Serafina, putting an arm around her shoulders. "He's right. I am strong. But you are the true strength of this family, Serafina." She looked at him, her eyes shining with a mixture of love and gratitude. "We are a family, Elias, and that's what matters." He pulled her into an embrace, with Lucas in the middle, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. The past, with all its pain and suffering, was behind them. Now, what mattered was the present, the love they had built, and the future they were creating together. Lucas, realizing he was being squeezed in the hug, started to laugh again. "Mommy, Daddy, it's tight." They laughed, releasing him, and the boy ran to the lawn, ready for another game. Serafina and Elias sat, watching him, their hands intertwined. "Did you ever imagine we'd get here?" Serafina asked, her voice soft. Elias looked at her, his eyes full of love. "No, but now that we're here, I can't imagine my life any other way. You and Lucas are everything to me." Serafina smiled, feeling a tear stream down her face. "I'm grateful too, for you, for him, for this life we've built." And as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, they continued to watch Lucas, who was now playing with a butterfly that landed on a flower. That moment was perfect, full of love, peace, and the promise of an even brighter future. And deep down, Serafina and Elias knew that no matter what the future held, they would be together, facing everything as a family. The love they had found in each other was greater than any past pain, greater than any hurt or regret. It was a love that had been built slowly, brick by brick, with patience, forgiveness, and the courage to move forward, even when all seemed lost. Serafina looked at Elias, her eyes reflecting the golden light of the sunset. He was there, by her side, the man she once swore to hate, but who was now the father of her child, her companion, her safe haven. She thought of everything they had been through together, the arguments, the tears, the moments of doubt, and finally, the moments of love and reconciliation. Every challenge, every obstacle had brought them closer, strengthening the bond that now united them. Elias, in turn, felt immense gratitude for having Serafina by his side. He knew he wasn't perfect, that he still carried scars from the past, but she had shown him that it was possible to heal, that it was possible to love again. And Lucas, with his contagious laughter and infinite energy, was living proof that love could be reborn, even from the ashes of a dark past. "Did you ever imagine we'd get here?" Serafina asked again, her voice soft, almost a whisper. Elias squeezed her hand, his eyes fixed on her. "No, but now that we're here, I can't imagine my life any other way. You and Lucas are everything to me, Serafina. You are my family, my safe haven, my future." Serafina felt tears stream down her face, but this time they were tears of happiness. "I can't imagine my life without you either, Elias. You showed me that love can be greater than hatred, that forgiveness can heal even the deepest wounds." He pulled her into an embrace, wrapping her in his arms as Lucas continued to play on the lawn, completely oblivious to the emotional moment between his parents. The boy was the embodiment of joy and innocence, a constant reminder that love could bring light even to the darkest places. "I promise you, Serafina," Elias said, his voice firm and full of emotion, "that I will spend the rest of my life making you and Lucas happy. You are my greatest blessing, and I will never stop fighting for us." Serafina smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest that filled her with peace. "I know, Elias, and I also promise that I will be by your side, no matter what happens. We are a family, and together we can face anything." As the sun disappeared on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they continued to watch Lucas, who was now playing with a butterfly that landed on a flower. That moment was perfect, full of love, peace, and the promise of an even brighter future. Serafina and Elias knew that life wouldn't always be easy. There would be challenges, difficult days, moments of doubt. But they also knew that together they could overcome anything, because the love they had built was strong enough to withstand storm. And in the end, that was what kept them strong. Love, family, the promise of a future they were willing to build together. Because deep down, they knew that true love wasn't just about constant happiness, but about choosing to stay together, even in the most difficult times. And it was that choice that united them, that kept them strong, and that guided them towards a future full of hope and light. Did you love the ending of this story? Comment your thoughts below. We cherish your opinions.